This channel is for educational purposes only. Please do your own due diligence before making any investment decisions.
Hi, this is Joe Rabil. I'm going to give you a stock market update for Friday morning. And what I want to talk about now is the market has made a pretty good rally here. And the question becomes, how does that change anything? Is this just a rally into resistance, or is this actually a shift that's taking place? So I want to cover that. Now, before we get into that, if you want to learn more about some of these techniques, I would suggest starting with my book at rabilstockresearch.com/book. And also, if you do enjoy this content, please hit the like button and also subscribe. Okay, let's start out with the market conditions, and we're going to start from the bottom up with the sentiment. Now, I'm still considering it positive, but I did move this over a little bit because we've gone from now negative 12% to negative 3% in a single week too. But there's more bulls. It's just when we're negative, you really got to consider that on the positive end of the spectrum as long as it stays negative. Even in the small positive camp where there's just a few more bulls than bears, you tend to want to think that's more of a positive. But the jump off the low is a little bit of a concern, and we'll just have to see how things play out here. Again, this is more of a secondary indicator, right? It's not necessarily a primary signal for me. So I'm using it more as a condition of the market. And if everybody's really bullish or everybody's really bearish, then it can give you a pretty nice edge when you're on the lookout for a reversal. Because we've already reversed off the low here, now we're probably on the lookout for a move, a bigger move off this low. So it's gone from negative 12. If it goes up to positive 5 to 10 or 15, then we've made a pretty good move off the low, and then we could start thinking that this is no longer positive. All right, overbought, oversold. One of the things that has taken place here is the RSI 5 has gotten back above the 50 level, and the RSI 20 is still below. All right, now that's on the weekly chart. I'm going to go into this in a little bit more detail in a second, but I just wanted to point out we are back to neutral when you look at the overbought, oversold. And in this case, it could be telling us something relatively important. The volatility, the weekly, remains very negative. In fact, so negative that it's blown away, so far away from its moving average, that it might actually be a positive. So, when you get this sort of an extreme kind of a move, you tend to think that this is going to back down or at least consolidate and probably not maintain this type of volatility. Maybe it quiets down a little bit relative to where it has been. I'll cover the daily in a second, which has gone to neutral. The trends now, we've got a monthly trend that's still positive. The weekly trend is clearly negative, and the daily chart has now moved to neutral. From a momentum standpoint, the monthly is neutral and the weekly and daily are negative. All right, I want to get into the details of the charts though. You can see what's happening on the average true range of the daily. We're losing volatility on the daily chart as this keeps climbing now, right? So it's moving up, and it's not moving up in a big, huge way. Even today, it was a tiny little bar, even though it had a gap. So we would use the close of the prior day and the high, and that's the range for the day. All right, that's an average true range when you use the close of the prior. So you're including the gap, right? So when we do that, it's not an extreme bar, okay? Like when you do it here, here's the low of this bar and the low here. This is an extreme size bar, right? Same thing with these. Look at all the size of these bars. I mean, this week's bar has not been all that big, but you see what's happening here the last 3-4 weeks. So those are all significant, and most of them are bigger than any of the bars through the whole uptrend. All right. So I think that's important. Now, when we look at the RSI, so as I mentioned, the RSI on the weekly has gotten itself above the RSI 5, and the RSI 20 is still below. So we have the potential for a setup. Now, it would need to close in this area. Like if Friday's just a big day, then the RSI 20 could also get above, right? Or if we have a really ugly day and this comes back down, then it doesn't ever close above. We want the RSI 5 to close above the 50 mark. So if we have a day that's not extreme tomorrow on Friday, then I think we'd have a setup on the weekly chart. Now, in order to trigger that setup, we would need to close below the high bar, which would mean we'd have to close below here for the week. Now, I don't always wait for the weekly. I'd go down to the daily chart to get a signal or something like that, but I'm just letting you know what the rules are. The other thing I'll say here is on a daily basis, we already have the RSI 20 up at 52. This is extremely overbought up at 77. So the question becomes, do we push up a little bit more here and then pull back? Because if we do that, then we could actually get an RSI buy signal to show up on the daily chart. All right. So it's sort of interesting the way this plays out here. If we fail relatively soon, if Friday is kind of not great or, even down, and this starts to kind of falter, then we could see the potential for, both of these sort of turning down from key levels. All right. But here's what I'll say. We have the 50% mark here. We've broken through the 50% mark of the retracement from the high. So this move down to this move up, we have now cleared that. We're up at the 618. In fact, that was the high of the day, was the 618. I didn't put it up there, but that's essentially where we hit. Now, what's interesting about this, because it's pushed up like this, I think the likelihood is, and there's a couple of things going on. Number one, RSI 20 is getting above the 50 level. Number two, you can see what's happening to the 18-day. It is curling up. All right. So if this stayed flat through this rally, then we could just come right back down and break through. But now I would think it probably leads to a little bit more of a sideways range rather than just a straight down affair. If it's going down at all, I don't think it goes straight down now. I think it's probably got some zigzag involved. All right. So I did want to just cover those things before I switched over. And I know I've spent more time recently looking at fibs, right? I've been looking at price structure using the zigzag, and I've probably spent a little bit more time with the RSI. Now, one of the things I want to tell you about the RSI that I think is real important is if you're ever on the fence on what you're seeing at the MACD and the ADX, go and look at the RSI setup and see what the RSI 20 is doing, right? And see where the last RSI buy or sell signal was and which is in command. And if you think you have some type of a buy signal on a specific time frame, but it is not setting up that way in the RSIs, it can keep you honest. It's a great way to double check yourself. I don't suggest using the RSIs by themselves. I like to use the RSIs as a complement to the MACD and the ADX setups that I use, right? But what I'll tell you is that if you're ever looking at the ADX and the MACD and you're trying to figure out what's going on and you're a little confused, go to this and see if this isn't telling you something and clarifying some things. So that is my suggestion there. All right, so we finished off the month. All right, and I do like to look at what's happening on the bar of this month. Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, this is a massive, massive tail. But when it happens, so notice what happened here. Here's the 4, and we had an ugly bar to reverse to the downside and get the 4 declining. And we have just rallied back to the 4, which is now declining. Okay. Now, what I do to double check myself when I see this, because this to me is actually not looking all that bullish. And I know it seems like this is really bullish, but we're coming into the 4 for the first time. This is basically the first rally into the 4 after it's declining. And I think that at least leads to a test of the midpoint here. That's kind of how I would read this right now. Now, it doesn't have to play out that way. I mean, this could just be a big, huge reversal and it's just going to take off. I'm just telling you, when I see this rally, don't assume that this is a big tail and it's going to go running right through all this. This 4 has turned down for the first time. And, you can have these short-term reversals like this where it just turns really quick and then just goes right back up. But remember what happened. Think about this from a just from a standard, investor standpoint, right? Common sense. We dropped all the way down here, and all these people that bought up here, they were losing money very quickly. All right. I mean, we bought, like, they buy at 600 and it's at 500 very quickly to them. So now all of a sudden it's jumped back here. From a psychological standpoint, they could say, you know what, let me just get my money out. I wasn't really expecting this to drop this much. I really don't want to see this go back down there. So it could act as resistance in the short term. The other thing that's happening is MACD has crossed over, and it's official now. We finished off the month. Now, again, as I've been saying, I don't think that has to mean it goes through this long process. It could mean that, but I don't think that it has to. What it could mean is that short term, we need to do a little bit more testing before it's ready to go back to the upside. Now, it could come back down because it's failing. It could just come right back down and test these lows. Okay. I mean, it could be doing something along those lines, but I'm not interpreting it that way. What I'm interpreting this is that this is telling me that the odds of this going straight up and breaking out and starting a new trend are very, very small. Okay. The 4 turning down is also telling me that that's a pretty small likelihood, not to mention the fact that red DI has crossed over green. Now, it hasn't taken over it hasn't really broken out above the prior green peak. So it's not in command here, but it has shown enough strength to get back up through 25 and above the 25, the green DI. So we've got a bit of a mix here, right? We've come back down to support. We bounced off the 50% retracement. We closed back above the 18-month, which is rising, but we have this 4 that's kind of rolled over. So when I look at this, I'm kind of thinking, bigger picture wise, this doesn't look all that bad, but short term, it just looks like there's going to be some issues. Now, one of the things I've said, the reason why I like to use a 4 in any specific time frame is because, let's say I'm just looking at the monthly chart. I don't necessarily have to go looking at what the weekly's doing, because I know this 4 is pretty close to the 18 on the next lower time frame. So the 4 on this time frame, we can see this turned up. That means that the 18 is turning up. You see how that 4 is telling me what the 18 is doing on the next lower time frame. So it's just a nice, just to have that in your back pocket so you know. So the fact that this 4 is rolled over is telling us that we're rallying up to the 18-week line, and we're forming, essentially forming a pinch. Now, we had this lower low here before it moved up, so it's not a clean signal, but look at the strength of the sellers based on this rising ADX, which is at 39 right now. All right, so when I look at this, the way I feel about it right now is I've got this strong move to the downside and a retracement back. Well, what is that? Confirmed, strong move down, retracement back. Well, then what are we doing here? We should be thinking this is more like an ABC, right? So now it becomes, what does this turn into? We're at the 0 line here. Can this come down, rally up, and get these 2 lines to move together and form some type of a reversal signal here, which could end up being a trend line break, potentially, the way this is set up. I mean, in reality, you really could draw a trend line right now. We're rallying back to the 0 line. The ADX, I'd like to have it a little bit lower. So, it probably in another couple days, this will be down just a smidge lower, but it does qualify as a trigger 1 essentially out of my course. So we've rallied up. We've got that potential. Now, what happens if this keeps pushing higher? Well, then this is going to cross over. These lines are going to cross over. And then all of a sudden, we're not looking for a 1 trigger. It's going to have to be something a lot more complex. All right. Now, this is where, again, if you go back and reference your RSIs, if we get a strong enough move where the RSI 20 clearly gets above the 50 mark, then we know on a pullback, we could be setting up as a buying opportunity. So all I'm trying to do is frame out the key levels and make you understand that you don't have to make a market call right here. All right. We don't have to know what this is going to do. All right. All we have to do is frame out what's going to happen, follow our indicators, and follow what we see and not what we think we know. All right. Follow what you're seeing, and I think you're going to be a lot better off. All right. So that's the update for the week. Let me know if you have any questions.